Hello and welcome. I am the Director of Public Relations for VQA Wines of Ontario, also working to provide education and knowledge on behalf of the VQA wine industry. So I'm here to welcome you as part of a series of 10 webinars featuring VQA Wines of Ontario star varieties. And today I'm excited to introduce Riesling. And as you can see from this slide, there are actually 10 sessions featuring Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, and Gamay Noir. And we have put together a series of 1.0 and 2.0 sessions. Each of these sessions will provide you an opportunity to discover key flavor characteristics of Ontario varieties, learn about the different styles within each of those varieties, and also some fun food and cheese pairing ideas, in addition to meeting the makers. So please make sure you watch all of the different sessions because we have different producers and we have different wines within each of those. So what I'd like to do now is welcome our host for today. As I mentioned, this is Riesling 1.0. And with us, we have Peter Bodner-Rod. He's one of Canada's top wine educators. And so excited to welcome you back, Peter. He will be joined by 5 Ontario producers today who will share their Riesling stories. And so without further ado, Peter, I'll hand this over to you.
Thank you, Magdalena. Happy to be here for many reasons. Obviously, here we are on a beautiful summer day talking about great Ontario wines. Where else in the world would you want to be? And further to that, we're talking about one of my absolute favorite grape varieties, Riesling. And we're going to learn a little bit about Riesling today. And then if you tune into the 2.0s, you can add a further level of depth to the Riesling story. It's well worth taking the full adventure because honestly, the story of Riesling is a vast one. The breadth and depth of styles of wines and the story in Ontario in particular is very important. So without further ado, let's move on to the first section of our presentation. So before I get to talking about talking with our producers and virtually tasting the wines with you, we're going to do a little bit of a kind of ABCs of Ontario VQA and Ontario Riesling, just to get you warmed up. And then once the producer's on board, we'll have sort of mini introductions to the wines and sort of light interview so that you can put all of that education into action and see how what you've learned translates to the wines that are actually in our glass. We only wish you could be tasting the wines with us. You won't be today, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to taste and promote these wines with enthusiasm in your own stores. If you're not looking out a window at a beautiful Ontario Riesling vineyard, then just look at your screen because here's one right here up on the bench. Beautiful Riesling in the, it looks like the sort of mid to late part of the summer, maybe even early fall, judging by the changing color of the leaves and just how wonderful and healthy that canopy is. Looks like there's still fruit hanging, so harvest hasn't begun yet in this vineyard at least, but one of many really spectacular views in Ontario wine country and one of many spectacular Riesling vineyards in Ontario wine country. So Ontario wine country, well, what are we talking about? Of course, we're talking about 3 primary appellations, traveling from north to south. We start at the northern edge of Lake Ontario in Prince Edward County, and hopefully some of you have been there, or many of you have been there. I've been on a number of occasions and absolutely love this part of Ontario wine country. It offers something very unique, distinctive terroirs, et cetera, and beautiful, beautiful wines and lots to do and see. Stuck between the two, the second of the 3 appellations is Niagara Peninsula, where I'm sitting right now. And that, of course, is one you're probably quite familiar with. Sort of not the historic heart of the wine growing regions of Ontario, but certainly a very large wine producing region and quite a diverse range of terroirs, but we'll get into that shortly. And then as we travel south and west along the north shore of Lake Erie, on our way to Windsor, and at some point in the future, possibly crossing the Ambassador Bridge to Detroit, we have the Lake Erie North Shore primary appellation, an extensive growing area, very warm, very special, unique terroir there as well, and yet another spectacular place to visit, whether you're a wine aficionado or a wine beginner or just a proud Canadian tourist, another great place to visit. So when we take those three primary appellations and we dissect them ever so slightly, two of those three appellations are actually broken into smaller pieces. In 2006, the Niagara Peninsula was subdivided into 10 sub-appellations, and they're all listed here. And you may ask, why was that done? Well, it was done because as time passed, winemakers, media, scientists were all starting to get a really clear sense of the diversity of sort of meso or micro terroirs that existed within Niagara Peninsula. That to simply call a wine from Niagara Peninsula one and the same wasn't entirely fair, because it depended on where within the Niagara Peninsula the wine was being produced. Soils were different, mesoclimates, airflow, degree days, how the vineyards behaved, or the region behaved in the winter, how cold it got, how close to the escarpment you were, how close to the lake you were. All of those factors and others played a really important role in defining that all sort of important French word terroir, the natural characteristics that exist in the growing region that impart unique style to the wine, that unique fingerprint of the place. So read through these 10 different sub-appellations in Niagara Peninsula, and obviously take note of the South Island sub-appellation, which is part of Lake Erie North Shore. And it gives you a little bit of a sense of how they differ, what sort of really makes them tick. So that when you are in fact tasting the same grape variety, like Riesling, from different sub-appellations, part of the difference you're experiencing is the place it's coming from, not exclusively the winemaking influences. And if you think that's the final piece of the appellation puzzle, well, in fact, there is one other dimension to it. And if we look at our triangle and we start at the base of the triangle, we know all of our VQA Ontario wines are 100% grown, sourced in Ontario. And we break it into our three primary appellations, and then we break two of those primary appellations into the 11 sub-appellations that we saw on the previous slide. And then within those sub-appellations, certain producers might decide to designate the name of the single vineyard that the wine comes from. And if you have in fact purchased or have been selling a bottle of Ontario wine that has a single vineyard name on it, then you know with great confidence that not only is that wine obviously 100% Ontario, but it is in fact 100% from the named vineyard. So what you're tasting in that bottle is a very specific, distinctive expression of a small place. And this is becoming more and more important, more and more interesting, more and more discussed in Ontario as time goes along. We're starting to see very old vines in certain vineyards. And in the case of Riesling, older than 40-year-old vines, which in anywhere in the world is considered a very mature vine, with roots very deep into the soil and subsoil. You know, these are becoming, there's some real stars out there, and some very, very sort of distinctive terroirs that, you know, are captured in the wine year in, year out. Clearly, we're going to have some winemaking influence, and we're going to have some vintage variation, hot years, cool years. But through all of that, still at the core of that wine, that single vineyard expression is quite distinctive and even predictable, some might say. So if you fall in love with a particular vineyard, then you know you can go back to that wine year after year and enjoy a similar expression as you had in the past. So what makes wine country Ontario unique and special in the world? Well, there's an awful lot of things, but we're going to summarize it with three of the core pieces of terroir. The first is where we lie on the world map, between degrees 41 and 44 north of the equator. Specifically, we are. What does that mean to you as a wine enthusiast, as a wine educator, as a wine salesperson? Well, if you've ever looked at the global wine maps, you can see that practically 100% of the important high-quality wine-producing regions in the world fall between 30 and 50 degrees north and south of the equator. Every wine-growing region that you are familiar with falls somewhere, typically between those two bands. And here we are in Ontario, right in the heart of those bands. And that means we've got, frankly, ideal growing conditions because we don't have extremes of heat, or not long periods, long stretches of extremes of heat, and we don't have long periods of extreme cold. We have just the right amount of cold for winter dormancy to let the vines rest. We have a significant amount of total heat units during the growing season to ensure that the grapes can grow and ripen, and we can get all the sugars and flavors that we're looking for. And that is part one of the puzzle. Part two is the fact that we are tucked into these very deep glacier lakes, all formed thousands, tens of thousands of years ago when massive glaciers receded from the area and basically carved out these very, very deep crevices in the ground. And the massive Lake Iroquois basically was dispersed and turned into the Great Lakes and even the Finger Lakes of New York State that we have today. Why is that important to us? It's important because of the depth of the lakes. The lakes are deep, with the exception of Lake Erie, which is the shallowest of the three. But as you can see, Lake Ontario is a very deep lake, and that means that in the wintertime, that water's getting very cold. In the summertime, that water's getting very warm. And that cold water helps to, in the springtime, delay the onset of fruit, of basically budding and flowering and fruit set, all of these early processes in the growth of the vine, which is very good because, hey guys, if you live in Ontario, you know that it's really hard to know when spring and summer officially starts because we can have frost in the mornings into June. So we want to protect the vine. We don't want it to grow too early because if it grew too early and then the frost came, it could damage the vine. So the fact that we've got these Great Lakes to sort of slow the start of ripening is actually a very positive thing. So maybe you're thinking, okay, well, we have this delayed start. Does that mean we don't have enough time to ripen the fruit? And the answer to that is, of course we have enough time to ripen the fruit because the opposite is true of the lakes in the summer. They're getting very warm. They're holding all of that heat like hot water bottles at the base of your bed, not that we use them anymore. And that heat is emulating out of the water and kind of permeating through the vineyards, and the growing season is extended because of this sort of virtual heater that we have sitting in the lakes. So while we might lose a little time at the beginning of the year and avoid frost, it's added to the end of the year so that we can see fruit still ripening into November in many years. So the lakes are essential. And then the third piece, of course, of terroir and of our special terroir is the soils. And 500 million year old limestone soil is about as good as it gets. Anywhere in the world, you talk about high quality wines, it's not surprising ever to hear that limestone plays a role in that. It's the heart of many great wine producing regions of the world. And we have plenty of it, varying degrees near the surface. And on top of the limestone and mixed with the limestone, we have lots of other different soil types, sandy soils, marl soils, clay soils, alluvial siltier soils, and different other rocky soils that can impart unique characteristics into the wine. I think that's a really important thing to remember when we talk about Riesling, and we'll get to that in a minute, but just keep that in the back of your mind so we can revisit that. So what is the story of Ontario VQA Riesling? Well, you know, the bold print at the top says it best. It's this quintessentially fresh, crisp, and aromatic white wine that is, you know, I don't know. I think it's personally the best wine to share with people. I love tasting Riesling. I don't tend to drink a ton of Riesling on my own because I always feel like others need to be part of the celebration. It's I guess that's part of it. The other thing I think that you'll hear many reputable wine producers and critics around the world saying, people like Jancis Robinson, for example, will say Riesling is the greatest white wine grape on the planet, much to the chagrin of all the Chardonnay lovers out there and others. And of course, you're inclined to ask them, well, why? How is it that you can define one grape variety as the greatest white grape variety? And their answer will be, if they happen to believe this, that they believe it happens to be the best vector, the sort of transmitter of the taste of the place that it's grown, more than any other grape. And we don't have, this isn't the forum to have a discussion on that particular subject. There will be some who agree and some who don't, but certainly because of the purity of Riesling, because of its unadulterated freshness and its pure fruit expression, it does carry with it the taste of the terroir that it was grown in. And so I advocate that point of view. And I think if you think that, wines are great because they taste of the unique places they're grown, then you probably would agree with that statement that it might be the greatest white wine. But there's lots of other reasons to consider Riesling a great wine. For starters, it comes in many forms. I think a lot of people hear Riesling, their first thought is, oh, that's that sweet white wine. Well, it can be, and it can be absolutely spectacularly sweet. Very sweet, the best of the dessert wine world. Lightly sweet, so that there's just that lovely acid, sugar, fruit balance, or that sort of classic Germanic style that we're very accustomed to. But it can also be very dry and actually quite full-bodied. And we're seeing more of that in Ontario as time goes on, as our vines get older, and we get more extract into the wines through the growing season. And in those warmer years when the acid naturally balances itself out, we don't necessarily feel like we need to leave a little bit of residual sugar in the wine because the natural balance already exists and the sugar isn't required to sort of even everything out. So don't think of Riesling as a sweet wine. Think of Riesling as a great sweet wine, an off-dry wine, a medium sweet wine, a dry wine, and also a great sparkling wine. And that's something else that we do very well in Ontario. Sparkling wines typically made not so much in the traditional method or the second fermentation bottle method, but the cuve close or the extended fermentation in tank, second fermentation in tank method. What are we expecting from Riesling? Lots and lots of fruit. First and foremost, the lemon, the lemon-lime sorbet notes. Peachier, apricot when you get into slightly warmer vintages and warmer sites. Lots of beautiful floral notes, very expressive wines with lots and lots of aroma. And all those aromas translate to great flavors and great complexity on the palate with a beautiful backbone of acidity, even more than the great acidity of Chardonnay. Riesling has an even brighter, more vivacious, structured acidity, and combine that with sometimes that taste of terroir, that light stony note we might get from certain sites, and you really have this beautiful framework in your mouth for a wine that can age extremely well. And then as these wines age a little bit, they start to pick up this light petrol gassy note, this terpene note. Sometimes it smells maybe like pink rubber to some, and that is always the kind of signature element that reminds us that we've got Riesling in our glass and that it's a Riesling that is aging a little bit and those terpene notes are starting to sort of come out. So Riesling is not one thing. Riesling is many things, and Ontario Riesling, we do them all extremely well. Off-dry, dry, semi-sweet, sweet, sparkling wines, and of course our great Riesling ice wines, without a doubt the best in the world. Countless world trophies have proven that out, and extremely age-worthy wines as well. Not just the ice wines, but the great dry Rieslings and off-dry Rieslings and sweet Rieslings. Other styles of sweet Riesling age very, very well, happily sitting in the cellar from a great producer, a great vintage for 10 years. If you like to maximize the developed character. Certainly not suggesting everyone should age their Riesling. That's a personal choice, but it's a wine that's capable of aging, and that's always a sign of a very high quality wine, if it's a wine that can age extremely well. When should we enjoy Riesling? Well, if you consider the number of styles that we've just talked about, one would suggest that there's probably all sorts of different occasions that you can enjoy this grape variety. Whether it's as simple as I mentioned, welcome to friends when they arrive for a party, and you want to share the taste of a place with your friends. I mean, I'm in the wine business and work at a wine you know, in wine programs at a wine college. So certainly I'm surrounded by winemaker and wine friends all the time, and we love to drink Riesling together because every Riesling tells this wonderful story of a place. In that case, maybe it's an off-dry Riesling. It's a light, more delicate Riesling, but it can also be something a little heftier. If you are drinking some of the great sparkling Rieslings in Ontario, then you know, it's a great time to celebrate. Celebrate something important. Celebrate an anniversary. Celebrate a birthday. Celebrate a special occasion, a national holiday, whatever the case may be. A great bottle of bubbly Riesling is a crowd pleaser. It has that beautiful freshness, the fruitiness, that delicate residual sugar in some cases, and that is a style that most people can really wrap their head around. I don't want to jump out of Ontario, but think about the popularity of, say, Prosecco, and how many people are serving a wine like that at the beginning of a meal or at the start of a reception or of a party. And our version of that is VQA Charmat method Riesling. Very bright and fresh and friendly and very accessible. Once we get into more substantial Riesling, some of the bigger, more full-bodied Rieslings with or without sugar, and certainly our ice wines, then we can start looking at much more robust food comparisons. And with Thanksgiving just around the corner, you know, I'm a traditional English Thanksgiving celebrator. So, I mean, it's not an English meal. Obviously, it's a North American invention, but we celebrate the full meal deal. There's turkey, there's cranberry sauce, there's sweet potatoes, there's Brussels sprouts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the different flavors and textures on the table are looking for a wine that's got lots of perfume, lots of flavor, a little bit of sugar, because there's sweet elements in that dish, in those dishes, and you classically want to match sweet with sweet. And honestly, it's really one of the great, you know, seasonal pairings of the year is to have a great Ontario off-dry Riesling and enjoy that with everything on that Thanksgiving table. And then, of course, with the ice wines, sure, have it with desserts, have it with local fruits, desserts. We have so many great fruits in season. It's all just still rolling in. There's still a little bit of peaches left right now we're talking about. And there's more to come, right? More tree fruits to come, and Riesling ice wine's gorgeous with that. But experiment with Riesling ice wines and other ice wines with some savory dishes as well. Don't be afraid to try some of your savory, salty, spicy dishes with a true sweet Riesling, and you might love how those two play off each other. And then the food and wine pairing discussion is not complete unless we bring the cheese into the conversation as well. And as you can see from these suggested cheeses that pair very well with different styles of Riesling, we're really talking about a pretty broad range of styles of cheese here, from something like a lightly sharp one-year-old cheddar to be beautifully offset with a bit of sugar in an off-dry Riesling, to the rich, dense cream of a brie-style cheese where you may have triple cream and you've got that stickiness in your mouth and you need that gorgeous Riesling acidity and that freshness to cleanse your palate so that every new mouthful of brie is just as delicious as the last, to something more intense and robust like a strong blue cheese where you've got lots of flavor, lots of saltiness, lots of intensity. You want to match that with a Riesling style that is also intense and flavorful, and there's none better than any one of the great Riesling ice wines that we make in this region. So that's a brief introduction to Ontario and to the things that we do and the special place that allows us to make such fantastic world-class Riesling. But really the proof's in the pudding. So let's not wait any further, and we'll start to invite our guest wine makers and winery representatives to talk a little bit about each of the 6 wines that we have on tap today. And we will start with Cave Spring Vineyard. What can I say about Cave Spring? Well, if you know the Ontario wine industry, you've almost certainly heard nothing but great things about this winery, one of the iconic, high-quality producing wineries in Ontario, and very terroir-driven. Gabe showing us that beautiful label, and he'll tell us a little bit about that exotic bird on the label, I'm sure. Maybe not so exotic. It's not a peacock, is it, Gabe? It's
no peacock.
What is that bird?
It's a goshawk.
Also known as?
Or a red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, beautiful. Anyway, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but so what do we got for you? What do we got on tap today?
Well, thank you for having me. Today we're tasting or showcasing the Riesling Off Dry, which is it's sibling in the LCBO is the Riesling Dry. Now, it's kind of the foundation of kind of Cape Spring. We started the Panichetti family. So Cape Spring is a family-owned and operated winery. I'm very fortunate to be part of that history and story and going forward in the present and into the future. Really, like you mentioned, it really is a winery that is focused on terroir, origin of fruit. And if you've tried our wines over the years, there's a consistency to them, whether it's the red wines or the whites. And that consistency really derives from the origin of fruit, and that we are sourcing our fruit at all levels of our wine from our estate vineyards on the Beamsville Bench and our small holdings in the Lincoln Lakeshore, which is just north of us in the sub-appellation of Lincoln Lakeshore. So, well over 95% of our fruit in any given year, and in most years, 100% of our fruit are coming from those two sub-appellations, and the majority coming from our estate holdings in the Beamsville Bench. So as I mentioned, being a family-run business, the Panichetti family, they live on the farm that where we grow our grapes. We're very focused on sustainable viticulture, sustainable winemaking. We're the first certified in both categories in Ontario. So we're very much focused on shepherding the vineyards for the future, not for just the present. This wine we mentioned is, as I mentioned, is the off-dry Riesling. Now there is residual sugar in this wine, but that residual sugar is left for balance. So we're not looking to make a sweet Riesling, or the Riesling. The residual sugar is all natural, and it's left to create a balance with that acidity. So you kind of have that, that residual sugar up front, and then the acidity freshens the palate, and there's a balance there. You're not left with cloyingly sweet feeling on the palate. Now that's of course from the origin of fruit, with the integrity of fruit, but also we do over 70% of the wine is fermented with natural yeast. So you get an added texture in that component as well. We also leave the wine on its lees for 4 months. So you have stainless steel 100%, adding in the natural fermentation component, adding in lees contact. One of the great things is just that consistency through the portfolio, and it starts at the origin. I love this wine particularly with like Asian food, Asian fare, like a soy glazed chicken or tofu, those kind of like those sweet savory notes you get in those dishes, or a little bit of spice, and that, like you were mentioning earlier, that acidity kind of keeps the palate fresh, keeps things moving, and gets you ready for the next bite. So I really honored to have you guys sell our wines, and we're really proud to be on the shelves in the LCBO.
That's awesome, Gabe. This is a gorgeous wine. It really is. And the fact that there's, over 8,000 cases of this kind of quality at this price is just shocking to me. It shouldn't be shocking, and it's not really shocking. I'm saying shocking because, it still befuddles the mind that all of those techniques and all of that attention to care and detail, that sounds like something that goes into a $35 German Riesling. And to get all of that in a $15.95 Riesling that is widely available and regularly available is such a wonderful success story. Without getting too involved in the science, that acid sugar story is just so vital to this grape variety. I mean, can you give our listeners a little bit of perspective on what 8.7 grams per liter of acidity feels like without sugar, say compared to a standard Chardonnay that you might produce?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a tough one in that, everyone perceives those things differently, but I guess it would be like having like lime juice, like a citric acid, that sharp, crisp puckering. And so that's what kind of, without the residual sugar to create that marriage in your palate of balance. It could be quite a puckering acidity, when you bite into some citrus fruit. Find that what Angelo likes to say, the sweet spot, you know, where you have just enough residual sugar so that you know the wine isn't left sweet on your palate, but that acidity is also not pronounced either. So you kind of, it's like the perfect balance of the two, the sweet spot. You know.
And that's really it. That's the heart of the matter right there. Well done. Thanks for bringing this along for us.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So next we're going to visit Angels Gate Winery, another of our iconic, magnificent wineries, and talk about a view. If you've never been up the hill and stood on the front porch of Angels Gate and looked out over Lake Ontario on a clear day, you are truly missing one of the great vistas in Ontario / Canada / international wine country. I have a strong affinity to the wines of Angels Gate, partly because the winemaker is a close friend of mine, but really more than that, it's because of just the genuine caliber, the high caliber and consistent quality of the wide range of wines that are produced there. And again, I don't want to steal your thunder, AJ, but in case people hadn't heard, we just learned some really good news about Phil Dowell in the last couple of days. Maybe you can add that to the discussion of your wine for us.
I will indeed. Thank you. Great. I appreciate you taking time to spend a little bit with us and look at some Riesling together. As you mentioned, there's some very good news out of our camp, and we found out on Friday that Philip Dowell, our winemaker, had won Ontario Wine Awards Winemaker of the Year. Now, for those of you that don't know Phil, he's very quiet. He's a very humble guy, but I know that he certainly appreciated the award and the recognition amongst his peers. You know, Phil is an avid professional. He's been making wine for a lifetime, and we're very fortunate to have him here steering both our viticulture and all of our winemaking program. So it was interesting this year because it also comes on the cusp of our 20th vintage. So we're pretty excited. Phil wanted to join today, but we're bringing fruit in the next 48 hours. And he got called away on business such that. So you get stuck with me, unfortunately. So anyway, we'll talk very briefly a little bit about the winery. For those that don't know, we're located in the Beamsville Bench. The property is situated on a farm that was once owned and operated by a Christian sisterhood. It's our smallest property at 25 acres. We actually farm more than 200 acres of vineyard. All here within a 3-kilometer radius of the winery location. And today we're going to focus a bit on the Suisse Reserve Riesling. Now, the photograph that you have in the presentation, it came from the LCBO's website. Unfortunately, it's old packaging, so I have new packaging right next to me here. So the 2017 does look a little bit different, but the wine inside the bottle is equally as delicious as that in incarnation. So the Suisse Reserve is actually a winemaking technique, which a lot of people don't know. They think that it's a brand name. But the winemaking technique is where we take unfermented Riesling juice, and to it we add into the dry Riesling or dry finished Riesling to get two major things. One, to increase the sweetness naturally, and two, to create a little bit more mouthfeel. So if you were to think of, you had like a glass of Welch's grape juice, a little bit more viscous, a little bit more coating inside of the mouth, and the Suisse Reserve technique kind of accomplishes the same thing. Much like you talked about before, the acidity in it is very high. If the acidity wasn't there along with that additional sweetness, you could use it to clean your driveway with. So that balance really keeps things in line for us. The Suisse Reserve celebrates 15 years in the LCBO, which I thought was kind of cool. I looked that up this morning. And it's the only continuous wine in the Angels Gate family that has been produced since 2001. So it really is our flagship varietal. About 20% of our planting is Riesling. So we're very much dedicated to what Riesling has to offer in the peninsula, and in particular in the Beamsville Bench for us. What do I pair it with? Well, for me, I mean, you mentioned a bunch of things. Obviously, there's the poultry front, and there's the stir fries and all that kind of jazz. But for me, it's spicy chicken wings. So I will take my deep fryer out back. I'll deep fry up a bunch of chicken wings, and then I just cover them up in hot sauce, crack open some Swiss Reserve, and then kind of go to town from there. And then they asked, you know, well, geez, what would be your kind of like 3 little takeaways if you could, as far as Riesling goes? And for me, it's really the 3 Gs. So one, it's great value. $13.95, I think is excellent value for Riesling. It is our Goldilocks varietal, so it's not too sweet, it's not too dry, just perfect for everybody. And the final thing, which I know you've already mentioned, is you got to have it with food. And I think too many people think of Riesling as you just sit around and drink a glass and, you know, because it's really, you know, there's a bit of fruitiness, a bit of sweetness, very refreshing. Yes, it is all of those things, or can be all of those things, but it really comes to its own when you bring food to the table. So that would be my preference whenever we drink it in my house.
Well, that's no surprise to me, AJ. I would argue that Riesling in Ontario might be the most versatile food wine that we produce.
I agree, absolutely.
You can pretty much throw anything at it, and as long as you found the right Riesling, you're going to be smiling afterwards. That's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's delicious. Thank you again. $13.95. The sugar is just so beautifully balanced. There's lovely richness on the mid palate. It's not light as a feather, and it's not the least bit heavy as well. It really is that, as you say, Goldilocks wine. It's just a perfect expression of a noble grape from great terroir. Well,
that it is.
Congratulations to you, your whole team, and back to Philip as well.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So from Angels Gate, we will travel in the direction of Niagara-on-the-Lake and a different body of water, or closer to a body of water, really, I should say, to this little winery that some of you might not have heard of. Sorry, bad joke. INNISKILLIN, foundational winery, benchmark winery, where it all began winery. There's so many accolades you can throw at INNISKILLIN, and all of them deserved, and they continue to do innovative things alongside the classics that they produced for decades. There aren't many wineries in Ontario that can claim that spectrum of successes that INNISKILLIN has had. So we're really happy to have them in the mix, and we're going to hear from Bruce Nicholson now, and again a little later on as he takes us further east in the direction of another wine producing region that's part of the Arterra family. So Bruce, tell us about the Riesling Pinot Grigio.
Thank you, Peter, and it's certainly an honor for me to work at INNISKILLIN. It was something I tried to do many years ago, about 1985, if you can believe that. But this harvest here, I'll be actually starting my 35th vintage in the Canadian wine industry. And that includes 20 vintages in the Okanagan. Both very different terroirs, wine regions for sure, different styles of wines. Interesting to know that the reason I made Riesling in the West, but I make a lot more here. You'll also notice that this particular wine is a dual variety, and I'll put the bottle up here to see. So Riesling Pinot Grigio. And the idea behind this, and what I really like, is that these are 2 varieties that are very well known. I think even the novice wine drinker knows these varieties. And even though Pinot Grigio, I actually never made that out west, when I arrived here in the early 2007 at INNISKILLIN, I realized how popular Pinot Grigio was. And so I do a Riesling on its own. I do many Rieslings actually on its own. I do a Sous Riesling as well. I do a drier style Riesling. I do a late harvest Riesling, and I do Pinot Grigio. So this I thought was a natural to put together here because, again, you want to be very consumer friendly, and I believe this wine is. And also, as I mentioned, I like the fact that even a novice consumer recognizes these two varieties. This wine is something that we've talked about food, and we've talked about just drinking on its own. this is definitely a wine that you could sit on the patio this weekend, for example, and enjoy it on its own or with a wide variety of foods. These two wines, these two grapes come from the Niagara region. They come from mostly from 4 Mile Creek and the Niagara River. They ripen at different times, so they have to be kept separate, both the Grigio and the Riesling. And then I blend them accordingly. I usually, in this case, it's about 20% Grigio. And I like the Grigio in there because it actually takes the edge off that searing acidity that we can have with a straight Riesling, which we also, as mentioned by previous winemakers, there tends to be some residual sugar, and we want that for that balance. So again, it can be enjoyed on its own. It can be enjoyed with food. It's all done in stainless steel. We want to preserve that freshness. We want to feel that crisp acidity. Some of the foods that I've written that I've put out there that I thought would go very well with this wine is arugula and peach salad that my wife has done for me with bruschetta, tomato bruschetta with fresh goat cheese. And you know what? Also with chicken. I think, chicken is an open canvas for a wide variety of foods. And there's so many different styles of chicken that this wine would work with. So we produce on this, the other thing I've noticed about this, there's about 7,500 cases of this wine. It has become so popular. And maybe it's for the reasons I've said, that these are two very popular varieties. It's got some great acidity to it. It's got that little bit of a residual sugar, as many of the other wines that we've tasted here. And I think it's a very good value wine as well. And it's available.
Wonderful, Bruce. Thank you very much. I love the blends in Ontario. It's not something that I spent much time talking about, but we do such a good job of making pure varietal wines. But the story of the blend is really a vital part of our story as well. It's just another tool for the winemaker to find a new expression, to work with different harvest dates, with different sites. And frankly, many of the best wines I've had in Ontario over the years were blends. And I wonder if the consumer appreciates, the advantages that do in fact come when you put multiple grape varieties together. They might not realize why they love Châteauneuf-du-Pape so much, but Châteauneuf-du-Pape, more often than not, can't live, as a solo variety. And I think we have our own, unique versions of that here. And this is a perfect example of that.
Well, then the idea, of course, is we want to take one grape variety and add it to another and even make even a better wine. And as I mentioned again, is that Grigio is so popular here in the Niagara region as well. Riesling, everybody knows Riesling, I believe. I mean, it's arguably, it certainly is in the top 3 white varieties in the world. And for a consumer to come in and say, well, gee, I know both these varieties, and it's a blend, and there's right on the label there, so it's not hidden at all. They know what it is, and I think it's not only a great wine, I think it's a great value wine, and I think it's well balanced, and I think it shows the terroir, the typicalness, typicity of Niagara Peninsula Riesling, with that added bonus of Pinot Grigio.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Well, thanks for kicking off the blend story, because the next wine that we're going to talk about is also a blend, slightly different mix, but equally intriguing and delicious. We're off to Struun Winery. What can we say about Struun? Well, just speaking with the winemaker, Mark Bradshaw, is going to be with us here in a second. He was regaling me with the surprising story of 10 years making wines at Struun Winery, and he's been doing such a great job of it for the 10 years. He's clearly become a really important part of the Niagara story as one of our iconic winemakers, one of the great contributors to our growth in these last 10 years. We're delighted to have him here. And if you've not been to Struun, there's plenty of reasons to go to Struun, including a wonderful tapas bar restaurant, which I think is still open through these tough times, and I've heard nothing but good things about it. So, Mark, welcome, and tell us a little bit about the blend number 2 that we have in our portfolio today.
Well, cheers, mate, and thank you for having me. We're looking at Struan's Riesling Gewürz right here, or Riesling Gewürztraminer, if you want to say the full name. This is made out of Struan Winery. We're located in Niagara-on-the-Lake, out on Lakeshore Road. Beautiful part of the world, to be honest. The winery itself is actually built, renovated former cannery site from the 40s. And as of next year, Struan will be celebrating its 25th anniversary, and as of next year, it'll be 10 years for me. So it's been some fun times. But this wine here, the Riesling Gewürz, this is really the wine that launched Struan over 20 years ago. And this is the label that, get that right there. We're actually revamping the label as it is, so I'll just give you a gander at the what the new label's like, sort of bright and really poppy. But it's under the Two Vines label of Struan. And the Two Vines, you know, is a reflection of the 2 varietals that we use in this blend. And you know, for me, it's part of the art of being a winemaker, is working your blends. And the reason this blend works so well, and the reason this blend's become so popular, is because you're taking really two polar opposite varietals. I mean, you got your Riesling, your Niagara Riesling, with your racy acidity and lovely citrusy notes and a great spark there. And Gewürz, which has an inherent natural sort of richness to it, and spicy notes, and you're basically putting the 2 together, and it's making this sort of more complete picture. And that's why the wine works so well. That's why Riesling Gewürz has become such a popular blend for Niagara. So this is, you know, this is a large volume wine for us. So we source from 15 odd different vineyards for both the Riesling and the Gewürz. Primarily all our vineyards are located down here in Niagara-on-the-Lake, but we do have some fantastic growers up on the Benchway that we source some Riesling from, and a little bit of the Gewürz as well. Fermented all inox in stainless steel. And I really make an effort to try and stop some of the Riesling ferments in particular, capture some of that real natural residual sugar for the blending purposes. And you know, it's the word that you guys have heard all throughout this seminar. It's balance. It's all about balance. You know, Riesling is the predominant varietal in this blend. And with Riesling, of course, comes, as I said, that raciness, that lovely zesty acidity that you want on a Riesling or a Riesling blend. And to balance that, we'll have some natural sweetness, natural sugar there to balance it, because the end of the game here is to make a beautiful, lush, fruity wine, thoroughly enjoyable, with a lovely, zesty finish. It's about a refreshing finish. For me, the game of winemaking boils down to, once you finish that first glass, do you want to go back for the second? You know, the end game is, yes, you're going back for the next glass, because the wine was that enjoyable and that refreshing. It's some of the key words you want to avoid that you heard other guys also saying they avoid, you know, that cloying, or going the opposite way, you know, cloying too rich and sort of really sort of sitting in your stomach, or going the opposite way where it's just too racy and it's, you know, that sort of drinking sort of lemon juice sort of thing. You get that perfect balance where you start with the gorgeous sort of little rush of sweetness and fruit flavors and lovely spiciness and lovely sort of snap on the tail, and then you're back for your next glass and you've just won. So it's really great wine for me. It shows the versatility of Riesling. It shows the amazing Rieslings that Niagara has gotten so famous for. And for me, it's a perfect wine on its own. You know, this is a sort of wine that summer or winter, I could sit there with some mates and just enjoy it. Pairs fantastic with some of the foods that people have mentioned, you know, spicy Thai. I find a nice mild curry works great with this wine as well. But it's you know, it's a fun, no muss, no fuss, just thoroughly enjoyable wine. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Mark, you know, I'll add to the two things very quickly to the fact that I know we're getting a little tight on time, but the aromatic piece of Gewürztraminer is so vital as well. And it's just so nice in addition to that acid-fat marriage on the palate that you've got this whole other dimension of perfume, those intense floral notes and some of the more exotic tree fruits. Another great reason to put these two grapes together. And the thing I'll say, as a huge fan of Ontario wine, is I'm so happy that we're producing lots of Riesling Gewürztraminer, because nobody wants to see Gewürztraminer go away either. And so as long as Struan and others are doing such a great job of blending these grapes, because they're such perfect partners, we will have Gewürztraminer. It's not the easiest grape to grow in some years, but it seems that it's found a really great home on the, you know, in those warmer lakefront areas where their vines are a little bit protected. And good on you for keeping the flame alight.
Thank you.
You're not alone. Yeah, you're not alone. We're moving on to another part of Ontario where Riesling and Gewürztraminer are also doing extremely well. And we'll invite Bruce back. Oh, bear with me a moment. Well, we seem to have lost the screen very briefly, coming back to it. And give me a moment and we will be back with you. These things sometimes happen. Radio silence. As long as we can avoid radio silence, we'll be all right. So, thank you to Struan. Now we're on to SANDBANKS. And Bruce, you're coming back to talk to us about this same varietal blend, similar mix, but from an entirely different part of the province.
It is. And I'm very pleased to be talking about it. I did not make this wine, but SANDBANKS is part of the Arterra family here. And I'm actually I like the comments, Mark, about Gewürztraminer as well as yourself, Peter, here, because I think it is a great variety. It was produced out when I was out west considerably, along with many other aromatic grapes as well. I like the combination as well. It is a dual varietal as is obvious here. It's a 60% Riesling and 40% Gewürz. But you know, the Gewürz is I think it's noted earlier that it adds that richness to the wine, and it adds in that oiliness. And it's a variety of Gewürzes that it can lose its acidity, and so. But it still has a lot of that aromatics here, very floral, lychee characteristics. And so this is a wine that I think can pair very well. And I'm very pleased that Struan's wine was here as well, because I think there are two, like the Pinot Grigio before us, the Gewürztraminer adds a real element of aromatics to the Riesling. And again, almost like the Grigio, it can take an edge off some of the acidity. You know, if you've got if it's a very, very cool year and you've got some really biting acidity in the Riesling, that Gewürztraminer can take the edge off that acidity, because the Gewürz, as it hangs on the vines, it can, some of that acidity can drop considerably. So it can make a tremendous blend here. As you can see, there is some residual sweetness on here. And again, I'm going to repeat what my colleagues have all said, but it's all about balance. We've still got it's still got that great acidity, but it's also got that little bit of residual sweetness as well to balance the wine. Yeah. The wine, again, they would have been fermented separately, all in stainless steel. There's citrus notes, some minerality from the Riesling, floral, tropical fruit from the Gewürztraminer. the food, probably very similar to what our Mark had said on food pairings, but spicy foods, ethnic foods, some white meat, garlic and creamy dishes. It will all work very well, but also it's going to work very well on your patio here today for Labor Day as well here. So I think it's an awesome wine from a little different area of Ontario, but again, I think it shows great typicity of what a Riesling and not as popular, but still a great variety like Gewürztraminer. And as you said, Peter, I'm glad people are still recognizing this variety here. I think it has a place in Ontario. It had a place out west, and I still certainly think it has a place here. And these two wines do make a very nice blend.
Yeah. Well, I know I don't speak, I know I can speak for everyone when I say we are really looking forward to seeing what the Bruce Nicholson version of this wine is as well in the years ahead. I know this was recently acquired and you haven't been involved from beginning to end, but we're all very excited to see what your expression of Riesling and Gewürz will be in the vintages ahead, Bruce. We will stay tuned. Thank you very much for being a part of the presentation today. So we're going to wrap up our last wine. We're going to travel yet again to another of the primary appellations in Ontario, the Lake Erie North Shore appellation, and certainly one of the great iconic producers in that area. COLIO has been there since 1980. And, funny, I don't get to see Alison Christopher often. It seems when we're talking in interview video format. But it's really good to see you again, Alison, and really looking forward to hearing the story of Lily.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. So we are COLIO. We're located in the small town of Harrow, down in Lake Erie North Shore. So we're about half an hour outside of Windsor. And actually, this year we are very fortunate to be celebrating our 40th anniversary, which is very exciting, to be able to celebrate that with Ontario and VQA and with the LCBO. So Lily is our sparkling wine. It's 100% Riesling, done in a Charmat method. And the label actually was a local artist who had done a whole bunch of paintings for COLIO way back in the 80s. And one of the paintings was this gorgeous painting of a lily. And we took the inspiration from that and made that into our sparkling. And the sparkling is really supposed to be kind of like a lily. It is delicate, it is pretty, and everyone seems to like it. So this is done in the Charmat method. So the secondary ferment is done in tank. And we did that on purpose. Riesling, we find, with all of its beautiful freshness and vibrancy, really lends itself well to Charmat method, which preserves that freshness, which is fantastic for sparkling in this method. So, so it doesn't spend very long on leaves. And so you really keep all of that crisp acidity, all those beautiful fruit notes. So you get lots of lemony citrus and peach notes. And along with all the other Rieslings here today, you can see the residual sugars at about 15 grams per liter. And again, that's just to balance it out so it doesn't feel like you're sucking on a lemon, right? You want to be able to enjoy it, and that's really just what that residual sugar does, is balances out that fantastic acidity and makes it a really approachable wine. So this wine would be fantastic on its own. It's great just to have as a glass and use as a celebration, but it's also a really great value at $17.95 a bottle. And so actually my favorite pairing with it is plain potato chips, which is a really fun thing to do just for a date night. But that's why we really like this wine, is that it's good enough for a celebration and easy enough for a Tuesday.
Fantastic. Well, I love this wine, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't had it in a while, so really happy to revisit it here. And I'm reminded just how, how wonderful the Charmat method is for preserving the purity of fruit and flavor that we get from these varieties. As opposed to the Champagne method, which layers in so many of the flavors, Charmat does such a great job of preserving what you start with. And this screams Riesling. It just has such wonderful citrus notes, those floral notes are there, that beautiful tension and freshness, and then that added lift, very fine bubbles, which just is that extra little party in the mouth, the tickling of the tongue and the tickling of the roof of the mouth, the cleansing of the palate. Honestly, this should be everybody's house sparkling. At $17.95, they should be buying a case because this is absolutely delicious, beautifully balanced, and everything else you said. So let's hope next time we do this presentation, the case production will be 10,000 cases because of the growing demand that we're creating through these great tastings. Anyway, Alison, it's great to see you, and thank you very much for being part of our presentation today and for helping us wrap up the tasting portion of the presentation. So that's it, guys, for the tasting. That's it for the story of Riesling, and we'll pass it over to Magdalena Kaiser to take us home.
Thank you very much, Peter. What a great session. I'm so excited with these sessions. This is the second one that we've done. As I mentioned, obviously the Riesling one, and who doesn't love Riesling? It's certainly one of my favorites. So just a big thank you to everyone, including yourself and the producers, for taking us through all of the great knowledge and fun facts today. Also to the LCBO staff, thank you to all of you who are watching this video today, the webinar, and you can also download the PowerPoint separately. You are a superior group of people in the sense of education and knowledge and service for wine consumers in Ontario. And we just want to take a minute to just remind you of a couple of really important facts that we know are important to all of us and all of you and the consumers that we're all trying to connect with. VQA equals certified 100% Ontario grown. And that message may seem obvious, but it's something that people just don't always think of. And we want to make sure that they're understanding that when they see VQA on the label, it means that it is authentically 100% Ontario. And that is more important than ever, especially in these times. People are looking for local and really want to be assured that what they're picking is certainly Ontario. It's the most sustainable choice for Ontarians, picking local and picking VQA. And you can see that from the numbers in this slide, actually, with respect to the economic impact. Every single bottle of Ontario VQA wine provides $98.20 back to our own economy in our province. I mean, if that's not compelling information, I'm not really sure what is. 18,000 jobs, again, another astounding and amazing number. But lastly, and not the least important fact, is that our wines have an amazing value proposition on the global stage, and increasingly so as the price point goes up, as you get to more premium wines. They are certainly undeniable value, and we see that from international visitors who remind us of that, and Ontario consumers who taste our wines, you know, in various occasions, tasting them blind or comparing them to something where they might have had an import that they might be comparing it to. So thank you again, and please don't forget the quick facts. And then if we can go to the next slide, Peter, I just want to remind everyone at the LCBO that Doug Beattie is the Ontario VQA Wine Ambassador, and he has met many of you in the last several years in person doing sessions and cheese pairings. But today we've done this virtual session, but that doesn't mean that Doug's not available for you to contact anytime, email or phone, and he'd be happy to answer questions about the wines that were presented today, which are available at the LCBO, and also the wineries and the people that were part of the presentation. So thank you, have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.